Hi, my name is Halseth Fairham, and I was born in Portland, Oregon in 1926. My parents were Helen Long Bruckman and Merle Bruckman, and they lived in Portland, and later they moved to Salem in 1942. My grandpa was Fred Albert Bruckman, and my grandma was Hetty Drace Bruckman.
And the story related to, that eventually relates to Breitenbush is your grandfather, Frederick, made a patented an invention.
Oh, he was the inventor of the ice cream cone. It was a machine that made ice cream cones. And actually that pretty much saved the ice cream industry, because up to that time people had to go into a restaurant or an ice cream parlor to have ice cream. When he invented the cone, then they could walk it around with them, and it just took off from there.
And so he made his fortune, so to speak, in the ice cream cone business.
Oh, definitely. Then he sold out to Nabisco in 1928. So they took it from then.
Did he have any other children besides Merle?
No.
No?
No. Merle was an only child.
Okay. And when was Merle born?
Now that I'm not sure. I don't have that date.
Okay. I know he graduated from high school in 1917.
Just a minute. I did know his 1998.
1898.
1898. That
Yeah.
was it.
Yeah.
1898. Yeah. My mother was 1904. So.
And then somehow he became aware of the Breitenbush Hot Springs Company.
Yes, it's my understanding that he had a job or a connection with it. I think he was into drafting, and he heard about Breitenbush, and he went up to, I think he went up to do some investigating for them. They owned it, so they had sent him up, and he kind of fell in love with the whole area and decided that what he'd like to do was to make a resort out of it and open it up for more people. So he was able to lease it from them at that time, which was about 1925. And then he went in and he immediately started building cabins, the bathhouse and the swimming pool. Then eventually the hotel, but that was a problem because the money that they had to build the hotel, they lost most of that in 1929. And that's when Dad got the idea of working with electricians and carpenters and all different people that could help him build the hotel. And he made a deal with a lot of families that if they would come up, he would give them free room and board for their whole families if they would help him build his hotel. And that's what they did. They went up and they built several really nice houses back up in the woods for their families. And I particularly remember one family, the Olsons. And as a child, I was there, so I played with Joey and Marge Olson. The summer they were there, and they helped build the hotel. So then what?
So you started going up there
when I was a baby.
1926.
Yes.
So
and I went up with my mother and father every summer while I was growing up. And I played. There was always people working there that had children, and they would become my playmates. And we learned to swim. They said I could learn to swim before I could walk, practically. So I pretty much lived in that swimming pool and learned to do some pretty good diving, and that was our big attraction. Actually, the families just loved the warm swimming pool. And like I told you, during the 30s, when polio was such a problem, we had families that came up year after year because the children could get their exercise in this warm swimming pool, and that would relieve the families from having to do the manual exercise that they had to do at other times. And we have them, they would come and stay in what we called the tent houses. And if my memory serves me correctly, we rented that for about $7 a week so they could afford to come and stay with their family. And we also had quite a few older people with arthritis that came regularly and would stay for weeks because they could work out in the warm swimming pool. And that really was the big attraction in those days.
Were there other attractions like horseback riding or hiking or things like that?
Oh yes, we had horses for rent, and there was all kind of wonderful hikes. They had a hike to the gorge, and there was a Lake Leon, and both of them were about 3 miles from Breitenbush, which was really just a nice, comfortable hike through the woods. And we did, like I said, rented the horses. We had a beautiful big dance hall, and we had a dance every Wednesday and Saturday night. It was such a great dance floor that we had people come from Idana and Detroit and all that area for this, especially the Saturday night dances. Every night we had a big bonfire out on what we called the flats, and we had a person that worked there called Gildo, who was an accordion player, and he would play music for sing-alongs, and the kids would roast weenies and marshmallows, and it was a nightly occurrence. And so that was pretty much. And of course, a lot of the kids, they were so active all day long, they didn't stay up very late. We had a fun around the bonfire, and then they went to bed.
And when you had these dances, would there bands come from out of town?
No. My grandfather, we had a place to put up a big record player, and Grandpa played records. And did the music. So it was a big band dance area.
I see.
And
so that was swing dancing?
Oh yeah.
Was it ballroom dancing?
Ballroom. We were ballroom dancing. And every time there was a waltz playing, Grandpa would come down and dance with me. And it was a large, beautiful dance floor. At the year that we lost so many of our buildings because of a heavy snowfall, they were able to salvage the dance floor, and they moved that down to an area over by the hotel. A lot of people remember the outdoor dance floor, which was after the big dance hall.
Oh, it was an enclosed dance hall at first.
Oh yes, it was a big building.
Salvaged to an outdoor
dance floor. And I guess they just covered it.
Right.
To protect it from the weather. But a lot of people only remember the outdoor dance floor, which was kind of put up where the store used to be, which was another thing we lost. At the same time, we lost the dance hall.
So Breitenbush was a seasonal resort.
Oh yes, because the Forest Service wouldn't keep the roads open for us in the wintertime. So every fall we had to close it up, and we would take all of our linens and everything down and store them in the bathhouse because that stayed warm and dry all winter long. Then we'd have to go in early in the spring and put it all back together again. It was a big, big job. But he had a lot of regular people that would come up that helped him, that worked up there, and we always had people that stayed in there all year long. Caretakers that would guard it during the winter and be there to help all summer long too.
Except 1 year, the caretaker.
The one year he
everything.
didn't do anything he was supposed to do, and one by one the different areas started to collapse from the weight of the snow. We had a big snow, and then it rained, which made it real heavy, and the store collapsed. And to try and hide what had happened, he burned it. People that were being caretakers at the lower springs called my dad and told him what had happened. And my husband at the time skied in with a friend, and he helped salvage a lot of the things. They would carry all the wet things from the bathhouse up to the hotel, and they built big fire in the fireplace, and they strung a lot of clotheslines all over the place to dry out so it wouldn't all just mildew. And I don't remember how many days Bud, my husband, stayed in there to try and salvage things.
So you met your husband there?
Yes, in 1943. He came up to be a lifeguard. He had, he was supposed to go into the Navy Air Corps, and he was just waiting to be called into the service. And he decided working at Breitenbush as a lifeguard was a good way to spend the summer. So he came up in 1943 and became a lifeguard at the pool. Then he still wasn't called, so he stayed on and helped us dismantle everything and store it for the winter. So then he got his call and went into the service. He was in Naval Air Corps.
And when were you married?
In 46.
46?
Yeah, after it was over, he got his commission. He was an ensign and he was a pilot. He was in the Navy Air Corps as a fighter pilot. And of course he got out, it was, 45, I think, when he came home after the war. He decided he didn't want to stay. He stayed in as a reserve. And so, because he loved to fly. And by staying in the reserve, so many weeks out of every year, he would get to fly planes. And then he stayed on, and we got married in 46. And he helped run Breitenbush. He would go up and help Dad run. And then when they had some problems and all, he went in and helped run it so that Dad could keep it going. And he and I both worked up there, off and on. It's about all that they had going as far as Breitenbush was concerned.
Now there were different stone structures built around Breitenbush. Who was the man who did that?
Gildo, he worked at the bathhouse, and he was the one that had the accordion and played the music. He was up there for several years, and he lived up there. And it was in a cabin right in behind the hotel. And I think they call it the Mansfield cabin.
Where he stayed?
That's where Gildo stayed with his wife. And I don't hear much about her, but I do remember she was an expert on mushrooms. And she introduced us. We'd go for hikes in the woods, and she'd introduce us to lots of different rare mushrooms. And then would teach me how to cook them. So they were there for several years, and I don't have too much information. I don't really think she worked. I think it was just Gildo that worked at the bathhouse and then built all those unique structures around the mineral springs.
Now, people swam in the pool. What else did they do with the water back in those days?
Well, they went up to drink. It was very therapeutic, and we had a lot more mineral springs than Arkansas hot springs had. And they went through it, and they would analyze and come up with what different minerals and things were in each one of the individual. And then, of course, they had the mud, what they called the mud baths. And we had people that had eczema would come up and take the mud from certain springs and pack it all over wherever they were having problems. And from what I understand, it was very therapeutic. And they had different ones for stomach problems that had just traces of arsenic, but it was good for a stomach, whatever. And so all the ones had different kinds of minerals. And then we had that foot bath, and people would go and they would soak their feet in the foot baths. And then there was a partition down through, and they would play cards on that partition down in the middle of the foot bath. So it was a social place to go. Soak your feet and play cards and visit. It was a very popular place to go. And there was other gathering places where we put park benches for visiting and drinking the water. And so most of that's what they did. They came up. The kids wanted the swimming pool and riding the horses and hiking, and other people drank the waters and soaked in the mud baths and the foot bath. And so there was both recreation and therapeutic advantages.
And it was pretty remote back in the 30s and 40s. How did
Oh,
people get up
yes.
there?
Oh, yeah. No, there was a road that was built in. And then I can't know when it started, but they had a daily bus that went, I think it started in Salem, and would be up there once a day. It got in, I think, right around 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And so there was bus service, and people came regularly at different times a year for the bus service. Most people drove in. The roads were okay.
Right.
It was kind of scary coming over the North Saint-Liam. It was only one way, and you would have what they called turnouts. And you could tell somebody was coming because you could see the dust. No. And whoever was closest to the turnaround or turnout would pull over and let the other person go by. So it was kind of scary. A lot of people were scared to come up because of the road. But then they finally got the one on into Breitenbush. Originally, when my folks went, they had to take a horse and mule pack train in. There was no road in 25 and 26 when Dad first started going in. And he couldn't really start the building until they finally put in a road so he could bring in supplies. And they finally got because so many people were then wanting to come and use the area, they finally got the government to put a road in. And that was the only way Dad was able to go ahead and do the building, because you had to have a way to get all that supplies in to build.
And I understand he was a postmaster up there?
He was the original postmaster, and that went on for many, many years. And I think he even got a retirement something from the government when he retired, because he was an official postmaster. Yeah, brings
so
back.
What changed there in the 50s? At some point, 55 or 56, he sold the place.
Well, his biggest problem was the government. Because they were coming up with so many rules and regulations that they said he had to do this, that, and something else. And they were impossible to do. And he just got so tired of fighting the government that he finally just decided he'd had it. He was going to sell it. But one of the main things was the swimming pool. The swimming pool, the way he had put it in, all of the water came in one end and went through and out the other end. And it completely changed 3 times a day. And he had to send in a sample. I don't know if it was weekly or whatever, but it always tested pure. And yet, they said that he had to chlorinate it. That was impossible. The chlorine would have killed the beneficial of the hot water. And if the water came in one end and went out the other, how could you chlorinate it? And yet it tasted pure, everything he sent in. But they wouldn't even come up and look and see what his setup was. They insisted that he had to chlorinate, which was an impossible situation. Then another thing they said, because the water went out warm at the far end, that he had to put in a fountain so that the water would go up and cool down before it went into the river because of the fish. Well, about a block down was a huge area with all these hot mineral springs at hundreds of degrees that were coming down and going into the river. And yet they said he had to cool down the 80-degree.
Right.
And it was just so many of those kind of things that made absolutely no common sense that he decided he just couldn't fight with them anymore. They were unreasonable. Hey, none of it made any common sense. Especially the one cooled down the water, and the mineral water at 100 degrees and more was Mother Nature was putting it in on a daily basis. So those are the problems that he kept fighting.
So do you have any particular fond memories of the place?
Oh,
Growing up there?
all my memories are fond memories. I had a wonderful time. I swim, I would dive, I played with the kids, I had my own horse, I hiked. It was a wonderland. Just a marvelous place to grow up. And as soon as I got old enough, I started working for my father. I think it was probably around 14 or 15, I started working in the lunch counter. And then we got a little older, I worked in the store. And then when I got old enough, I started running the office and running the business, making the reservations. So from about 14 to 18 or so, I worked. But as far as growing up as a child, it was marvelous.
Now, did you, there was another resort just downriver, Skiffs. Did you have any interaction with them, or?
No, other than just trying to get people to come on past Skiffs up to the upper resort. A lot of people would come in, and the minute they'd get to Skiffs, it said Breitenbush Hot Springs, they thought they were there. So they would go ahead and check in, and only later they'd find out that the Upper Springs was the one with the swimming pools and the hotel and all the activity. And that's when my dad put this big, huge sign up right on the edge of the property telling people to come on up to Bruckman's Breitenbush Mineral Springs, and then listed all the different things we had to offer out there. But that was the only problem we had, was getting people to come on past the lower springs there, and Skiffs Resort we always called it.
And then there was another group of houses, the
Summer resort.
Summer resort cabins. With and did you have any association with them?
Oh, it was just the fact that they could come and use the property.
Right.
There was a place called Villa Maria, and Father Nugabar was the priest that came up. And every summer they would bring disadvantaged children, and we would let them have the use of the springs. They would come and use the swimming pool, and they could come and have the bonfire and the fun and whatever we had. We just kind of opened it up to these children that were staying at Villa Maria. And I thought that was a wonderful thing that the church did.
So you and Bud, how many children did you have?
Three sons.
Yeah.
We lost one about 3-4 years ago.
And
I have
sons ever up at Breitenbush at all?
Oh, they came up. I have pictures of them up there. And later on, when they were older, of course, most of them had their own interests and went, but they would come up, and my oldest son goes up regularly, every year anyway. I usually go with him and my other son. We try and go up. I get my Breitenbush fix.
And you had a sister. You were
Mary,
and,
Mary Lou.
and so she grew up at Breitenbush.
Yes, yes, she was there too. And later on, why, she was kind of a caretaker and a guardian up there when things really started getting bad with people trying to drive people out and come in and destroy things. She got to the point where every Friday she'd take her 2 boys out of school, and the 3 of them would go up and stay at Breitenbush over the weekends to guard it. And they called her Big Mama. And she had trained dogs, and if anybody would try and come onto the property, the dogs would start barking. And then she'd strap on her gun and go she did things I would never be able to do. But I really felt at the time that she saved Breitenbush so that we could sell it. See, Dad sold it three times. The last time was the only one that took. The first 2 to Halseth's, and I don't remember the name of the other group, but I'm sorry, they were a bunch of crooks. And they just went in and tore things up and did everything that they shouldn't be doing. And it was after that second time that Dad said, that's it. The only way I'm going to sell this is if I get cash.
Right.
And of course, the real estate backed out. They said that'll never happen.
Right.
And then Alex Beamer came along. Thank goodness for Alex Beamer. He had inherited money from his grandfather. And he was looking for a place like Breitenbush. And he fell in love with it.
And so your dad had these failed sales.
Two times.
On the mortgage, and then he sold it to Alex Beamer?
Yes.
Oh.
For cash. And that just saved the day for everybody.
Right.
Alex was happy, and Dad was happy, and everything worked out. But he had a lot of really difficult, bad times.
Right.
With people that he had sold it to, and then trying to save it from people that came up that were destructive, and we had the one caretaker there that just scared the heck out of people, I guess. They tried to take him to court, and they told all kinds of lies and fabricated what was going on. They had to go to court, I think, more than once. But each time they proved they were right, and that all the other things were erroneous, that they were just trying to drive them out. And they just, my sister was a fighter, and she just wasn't about to back down. If it wasn't for her, I really think they might have lost it to vandals and whatever.
And your sister has a son that may go up to Breitenbush sometimes too?
Yes, Lauren.
Lauren?
Yeah, Lauren knows the guy that's running it up there, or at least, I don't know if he's running it because it's a commune, not a commune, but a community.
Right.
And Peter Moore. And Lauren kind of connected. We still have property up there, at least Trowbridge do, on the edge of the Breitenbush. They kept that so the family could go up, and they had a nice big motorhome type thing up there where they would go up in the summers. And I haven't gotten a hold of Lauren, so I'm not sure if they still go up or not. I know Mary and my dad went up because that gave them a place to stay. And but I'm not sure if anybody's still using that or not.
Right.
I would guess so, because it was such a nice thing, an escape into the woods.
And your dad, Merle, died in '79 over at the coast?
Yes.
He retired over there?
Yes, he was over there quite a few years then.
And how about your mom?
Yeah, she died in '69. But they'd had the house at the beach even while they still owned Breitenbush, because they'd go over and stay at the beach after Breitenbush would close down. They weren't going up there. They liked their home. And then they sold out in Salem and just moved over to the beach house, Lincoln City.
So tell me more about the bathhouse, all the different activities that went on in the bathhouse.
Well, in the bathhouse, the front part was for the people that wanted to go swimming. And we had the lockers for them to put their clothes in, and then you had to have a big shower area because everybody had to shower before, and also there was restrooms there. And that whole front part was devoted to the swimmers. And then you went through a door into the back area, and on the right was a big steam room. Then you had a row of big, I think about 6 foot high bathtubs so that people could really get down. They'd soak and get water right up to their neck. And then you go on down, and in the whole back area were what we called the sweat cots. And they would have the sheets, and then they would pile wool blankets on. And they would have been drinking a lot of hot water, so it was kind of a in and out approach. And a separate room across from the bathtubs was the massage room. They had a special table there, and we always had a masseuse on one side and the masseur on the other. And the configuration for both was the same, just reversed, for the men on one side and the women on the other. Mm-hmm. And we usually always had a lot of young people that worked up there, school kids, and they could make enough money to, when they went home in the fall then, to buy their school clothes and this sort of thing. And of course that's where most people went that wanted to drink the waters and sweat out the pain and whatever. So.
Now, your dad, he built the cabins row A through F?
I'm guessing. I think it's F.
Right.
It's been a while.
Right.
But yeah, he built all those, plus the big O-row cabins on the other side of the river. They were the big 3 rooms. They had a separate kitchen, and of course you had usually a bed in the front part and then a separate bedroom in the back. So they were the largest cabins they had, and this is what they called it, the O-row. And
how were the cabins heated back in those days?
Just by a wood stove, because that's how they did their cooking. We supplied the wood, that we had plenty of, and but it was summertime pretty much all the time. You didn't really need heat that much, but they would fire up their wood cook stove, and not very big rooms, so it didn't take that much to heat it.
Mm-hmm. And then, do you have a story to tell about some of the plumbing in those?
Some of the toilets. Originally, there were no toilets in any of the cabins. Then after the war, when Camp Adair, you said it was kind of over by the Corvallis there, when they were starting shut down and they were dismantling it, my dad learned that they were selling off the equipment and the toilets. So he went over, and I don't know if he just bought them outright or made a bid, but whatever. When he came back, he had enough toilets to put them in the A and B rows. And if they're still there, and well, they are with the originals or not, but anyway, as far as I'm concerned, they were all sitting on G.I. Johns. So, and they had to make another room off to the side, and for each one of those, plus the plumbing that had to go with it. I'm still amazed at everything that Dad did up there. Of course, he had help. He had engineers, and he knew where to go to get advice and somebody to come in and help him do some of these things. It wasn't his doing. He didn't dig the ditches. He hired somebody else to do that.
So the lodge building that he built, nowadays there's an entry area. I guess there used to be a main desk there?
Yeah, as you go in, just to the right used to be the main desk, and and then in behind that was the separate room for the office for the hotel. And we always had usually a couple. We had one couple, the Johnsons, that came back year after year, and they would just come in and run the hotel for Dad. He always had good help. He lucked out with that. I don't remember ever having any problems with help.
And
people.
nowadays, after you go to that entrance, there's a big bare wooden floor room in the back. But that was a lounge.
That
back
used
in
to
the day?
be the lounge. They had the big fireplace there, and they had a lot of big rugs around and Davenport's easy chairs, and then they'd have tables for playing cards, usually off in a corner. But it was just a place to socialize, and it was just very welcoming, very warm atmosphere back there. That's about all they used it for, socializing.
So did you ever see any Native Americans come into Breitenbush
Uh-huh.
Hot Springs?
Oh yeah, during huckleberry season, they would come in on their horses over the mountain, and they had these big baskets full of huckleberries, and they'd wheel and deal with Dad, and he'd buy their huckleberries, and then they'd make them pies for the hotel. And I think just about every fall. And it took they're small. They're not big like blueberries. They're small, but so tasty. They're very unique. But it took a lot to make a pie. But they would come in quite regularly. He would just plan on them being there for huckleberry season. And they would usually, I don't remember where they stayed. They had their own place on the other side of the river, I think, maybe over where the horses were kept and all that. It was a large area. And they'd kind of put up their own tent or whatever they traveled, because they didn't have, it's quite a ways to go back to where they lived. I think they were from Warm Springs. I'm not sure about that. But I know they came a long ways through the huckleberry fields.
Do you or your sons go up to Breitenbush anymore? Do they?
Oh, every year.
Every year?
Oh, got to go for my Breitenbush fix. Yeah, no, we'll go up in the summer sometime, usually, just whenever they got an open season, so that we always like to go, usually for a couple of nights, give us a chance to see all the different things we want to see and go around. It's still a pretty wonderful place to go for R&R. So, yeah, we'll go back up. And I kind of know a lot of the people now that work there. And so I get caught up on what's going on. And they're always making changes. So I got to go find out what's going on now.
Okay, well, I think that wraps up our interview today. Thank you very much, Betty.
My pleasure. I've enjoyed it.
Thank you.